morning. This is D.A. Ward. Video diary on my 2-day-a-week commute to Orange County from Riverside County. It's the 20th of April, 2021. My intention is to wrap up the memorial to Bill Rathbun, my old friend. And I'm not sure which direction it's going to take. There are some things I want people to understand about him and about our preoccupations where they coincided with each other. We were both intensely interested in Indian singing and Indian songs and Indian mythology and the Indian people of the Feather River Canyon and of the Janesville, Susanville desert side of the Sierras. People became not just friends, but symbols almost of humanity and its applicability to everyone, and the training to recognize and participate in ceremonies and gatherings and celebrations that had nothing to do with our own culture. As we got older, I think it got even richer because we participated in the ceremonies and at the same time and the remnants of the Maidu Nation, or the Maidu, never was a Maidu Nation, the remnants of the Maidu in these localities, after 3 or 4 generations of intermarrying with the white settlers, willing or unwilling birth of babies and availing themselves of the job opportunities in a rural area. The Indians on the surface really weren't much different from the other townspeople. I mean, the Scottish and whatever their generations, whatever their 2 or 3 generation back ancestors had come from. Not so much different. Everybody wore caterpillar hats and had a beer or a 6-pack, in the evenings, and worked hard. And yet, the ones with Indian ancestry had a definite a definite spiritual side that the white fundamentalist kind of people didn't. not so sure that's a true statement, but I mean the church-going people of Janesville and Susanville and Oroville and places like that in those areas had church functions, and they showed up and participated in ceremonies also, you know, the Eucharist and the celebration of Easter, and but the Indians, even if they were Christian and had a Christian church side to them, were at least more attuned to the animal and plant life around them, and had a kind of mystic side, a kind of an acceptance of another world floating above this one, in which humans and animals coexisted as symbols and co-tenants of the planet, and that to kill an animal was an act that was fraught with ceremony and forgiveness and explanation to the soul of the animal that you took, so to speak, because it was necessary to feed your family or do something like that. And at the extremes, in the middle of like an all-night session of singing, mesmerizing Indian songs, and by mesmerizing I mean so full of gutturals and emphases that have to do with using your diaphragm and not just hitting the right note. In fact, at the best, the songs got softer and softer. You know, the most powerful moments were when the songs got softer and softer, and all that was left was the grain of the voice and the percussion of the sticks on the dirt, on the logs that are in front of you, that divide your, you know, that where you sit and that provide the lane between the two opposing teams, divide the road between the two opposing teams, I guess you'd say. And you got a sense that what we were doing was communing with something that lies above the ordinariness of our daily lives. We were actually working out things with the animals, and the people at the ceremony took the guises of animals. The women started. A woman looked like a chipmunk suddenly, and another person became dark and glowery like a bear. And, another person was sleek and intent like a cougar. And another person was fat and jolly like another aspect of the bear. And everyone intent, and everyone staring at each other with across the fire with half animal, half human eyes, and everybody working out the future of the place and its health and vitality by evoking the bear, for instance, at the bear dance, and absorbing and sending the power of the bear out to the participants who stroked the bear skin that was being worn by a central figure, and the electricity that that generated, just in the sense of touch. It was highly religious and highly mystic, and it wasn't just like singing a hymn in church. It was like saving the world. It was like maintaining the balance of nature, you know. And toward the end of my life, when I had suddenly we had a son, Cameron, which my wife and I adopted as an infant, a tiny 3-day-old infant from the hospital. Gradually, the preoccupation with the sun interfered with continually going back and back and back to the bear dance. First, we took him when he was like 8 months old, you know, a really delicate little infant, and slept him in the tent between us, and then took him every year, sometimes twice a year, if we went to the bear dance and the Feather River gathering. And he scrambled around the rocks with the other kids, half Indian kids and half local neighbors of the sacred area, which just happened to be a plot of land owned by an Indian family. But it contained rows and rows and rows of acorn grinding holes in the rocks that overlooked the Feather River Canyon, pretty high up near the Feather Falls, which was a spectacular cascade off of a granite slope, hundreds and hundreds of foot of falling water, especially in the spring. And across the valley from this plot of land was a huge granite rock. Like, think about Half Dome in Yosemite. That's grand, glacial carved monolith. And when Bob and Ann and Bill were palling around together in a family manner, Bob was staying at Adrian's family's piece of land in a cabin there that was that nobody in the family was using. Nobody in the Indian family was using, and they spent a summer out there, including Bill. I'm not sure exactly what the timeline on this was compared to some of the other things I've been talking about, but they saw all sorts of strange things going on that piece of land. Lights and moving lights and things coming out of the woods. And they went on a sightseeing expedition across the canyon to this huge rock. I'm trying to think of the name of the rock now. Just, you know, I mean, miles and miles and miles along the riverbed, there's this massive monolith, and it has gently sloping sides. You can see that there's trees in the top, and then the trees fall away, and the granite gets steeper and steeper, and pretty soon it's a 1,500-foot, 2,000-foot drop to the canyon. And they were out on this thing, and you know, when you're on these country roads, all you see is trees and forest. So they got off, parked the car, and started walking into the woods. And the woods, and they were tripping, I think, on psilocybin or something. And something happened to them. They got the woods melted away, and they were on hard granite. And then the hard granite got imperceptibly steeper and steeper. And what was an attempt to go from step to step became an attempt to keep from going step to step, because it was getting, you know, the force of gravity was pulling down at you, and you were gradually being lured into, you know, just doing a little more exploration. We can make this, you know, and they got to the point where they were absolutely terrified that they were going to fall in. Bill, at least, that was Bill's story. And so Bill Rathbun and I shared this. I was probably the more mystic of the two of us. He was more interested in the human beings, actually, you know, and the individual people that were playing these all-night end games, and the people on the other side, and who they were related to, and you know, he was more social, and I was just this wild dreamer, probably a lot more I mean, my personality is a lot more I spent my childhood reading the Knights of the Round Table and the original Morte Arthur, and my world was full of knights and damsels in distress, and from those days I read vociferously and vicariously. lived what I read. And this, of course, and Bill was more practical and technological, and the aspect of the game, of the hand game, and the rules, and its counting procedures, scoring procedures, which are rather, in one sense, they were simple. You could learn them in a half an hour of concentrated effort, like you're learning chess or something, or more complicated than chess, really. But on the other hand, when actual human beings are gesturing and doing things that impact the game's play, and a gesture had to be agreed on. The person doing a gesture was signifying which pattern of bones on the opposite side were the truth about, and the truth about where they were was sometimes under considerable doubt, because people could hold the bones in such a way that it was you were unable to see whether or not the two hands that held the two players on the other side who held the two opposite, the striped and white bones, hands were entirely separate from each other or not. And Bill mastered the vernacular and the nitty-gritty of maintaining a consistent stance for your side, and the very necessary art of choosing the right song. A song that would mobilize the organisms that were trying to meld into one and force reality open, like Pandora's box. Force all the good and evil out of the box, and play at a very basic level of human existence. And there was some bullying going on, and some squabbles and attempts to gain an edge using various tokens, plants and herbs that were highly poisonous. Biumbelliferae, the parsnip, mountain parsnip, that was highly poisonous, and you could have a little bit of that in a basket, or you could rub it on your arms, I think, and it would slightly distort reality. It would actually get through your skin. And people were a little loco sometimes. Loco in the sense of being lost in a kind of a primal state. And so people turn into animals, and I had this vision of the tribes of animals and all of the species with their representatives in human form playing a game of continued existence, to continue their existence as a species. And while Bill kept track of the bones, made sure that the right gesture was the right, was properly carried out, and kept his eye on the ball. And I was out there just hallucinating in all directions. Hi, Rob. Oh, about 10 minutes, I guess. Yeah, I'm on the Ortega. I'm past the gap. I'm approaching, Okay. Yeah. Bye. So that's the part I wanted to have everyone remember about Bill Rathbun. He was, and he had this totally other life, and so did I. But we were highly invested in this, and we did this for 25 years or 30 years. Bill every year, and me, I missed one year because I was driving back from Florida and blew the car's engine in Flagstaff, Arizona. I was trying to get back to the bear dance, but it didn't work out. And then in the last 4 or 5 years, at almost the very peak of when we had a group of like 30 people that regularly showed up and camped along the creek. I'm thinking of the bear dance now, the creek in west of Susanville in the mountains. The Forest Service gave us. Bill was highly involved, by the way, in working with the Nature Conservancy and the Forest Service, along with his friends from the Susanville branch of the Maidu, who were one man in particular whose nickname my aging brain, and whose real name I used to know also. Spent some time in his house and some time after the event carrying things back to the storage areas where these large kettles were used for brewing the large amount of food that would be served at the event were stored. In his living room, and he showed us art and stuff that he had collected. He was just an ordinary guy he was was also an Indian chief, but he was, I mean, sort of a chief. I mean, a chief. I mean, he was a leader in a homestead full of that had been granted the Indian tribe back in the 1900s, probably the 1900s, where everybody was semi-communal, just part of the town of Susanville, just outside of the town. Anyway, we're up on a bluff overlooking the town, I guess you'd say. Comanche is the name I knew this guy principally. And as far as Bill's other life things that he was doing, he was holding down a job alternately at Lawrence Radiation Lab in Berkeley, taking care of their computer systems and troubleshooting. That's after he'd done a lot of programming in various private companies, which I talked about, pointing huge X-ray machines at targets and recreating graphically the 3D representation of an animal or a mouse or something that was being observed. He was also an avid sailor. He started out with a small boat in the Berkeley Marina, which was a remnant of the kind of clubbish 1920s of the university and its well-off citizenry of the town of Berkeley, which was a town, you know, not terribly connected to San Francisco at all. Even before the Bay Bridge was completed. I mean, especially before the Bay Bridge was completed. They built this marina. Well, I think the marina came later, actually, come to think of it, because it was part of the Bay reclamation projects of the 1950s. Or maybe it was done, maybe it was, it probably was done at the time the Bay Bridge was being built. Anyway, it was a club, and it had owners of vessels who parked them there and paid rent, and had dinners and social events, and threw money in the pot to maintain the place, and interacted socially also, you know, with each other. And I went, and then he got a bigger boat, a much bigger boat, and really, oh, and he volunteered with Lita to go up and down the coast in this huge three-masted schooner that another nonprofit had rescued from its owner, and they took turns, you know, on watch. It was a big boat, and you actually had to have a military-like way of sailing it, and he was looking at the radar down below. It had some modern equipment. He was looking at the sonar, and they came through Carmel Bay and watched the bottom drop out of the Pacific Ocean down there in Carmel, it's where the Pacific Trench is. This huge deep canyon that marks the edge of the rift zone and the deepest part of the Pacific Ocean, almost right there. Not as deep as somewhere probably around Indonesia and places like that, but really deep. I mean, just bottom dropped off. And his second boat was a former boat that had participated in the yacht race that became a real sporting event up until, I don't know, at least until 2000. There were, you know, people in people like the guy that ran some of the Silicon Valley Oracle, the guy that ran Oracle had one of the last fastest sailing ships of this particular variety, two-masted, super thin, super sculpted sailing ships made just for this competition. They used to go against Australia all the time. Australia was also avid about this particular race. And he had one of these ships that had participated and been eliminated back in the 1960s sometime. It belonged to him, and he took it out on the bay all the time. And at the end, when I was talking to him just before he died, we were up there to... I have driving his car right now. 1991 Mazda 626, which he didn't need anymore because his wife has a newer car and he wasn't going to be driving. He was paralyzed. Half of his body was paralyzed and probably wouldn't come back even if he survived. So here I am in his car, and it was well maintained, 160,000 miles, 30 years old, 5-speed stick, Mazda 626, 31 miles a gallon. So that's a kind of a disjointed tribute to William Rathbun. Extraordinary person, extraordinary fidelity, extraordinary friend to many people, extraordinary hospitality, and tolerance. Avid stoner. Smoked marijuana almost every night of his life, but never gave it away. You know? Hopefully, I mean, in the last 4 or 5 years, the bear dance and the Feather River became impossible for us to go to because it interfered with our son's schooling. That's where his finals and all of his important things were happening in that part of the school year, that it was almost impossible to leave him alone. He couldn't really make his own food. Couldn't come up to the bear dance because he couldn't study. And so we never rejoined. We went up for one last bear dance, and it was kind of one last trip to the Feather River gathering, which was anticlimactic because the Feather River group were also dissolving. And the animals and the ceremony and the electricity was gone. And right after that, a huge wildfire came through that area. Second 2 or 3 in a row, and just burned the entire grounds down. It's like the power was gone from the place. It has to be revived somehow. So anyway, that's a kind of a sad end. This is D.A. Ward, 20th of April 2021, signing off.